Look at that.
You're right. Wow.
These two pieces seem to be part of the same stone. You could probably match them right up.
You know that stone, the famous HO stone?
Oh, yeah.
Is it on the island? That's the first question.
Not that I know of, Rick.
3 carved stones spent 50 years sealed inside a concrete floor on the Nova Scotia mainland, hidden there by the one man who had measured every foot of Oak Island. Fred Nolan mapped what other searchers destroyed. He recorded everything. Then he found letters cut into broken rock and recorded nothing at all. He never photographed them. He never published them. He set them in cement so they could not be lifted, turned, or read.
We're only guessing, all of us, you know, other than the fact that you say that Fred felt they were important.
Oh, well. Obviously, he
Obviously
thought
they were.
When a jackhammer finally opened that floor, the letters came back into daylight, and with them the question Nolan never answered. What does a message have to say before a man buries it? The man who measured the island. Fred Nolan came to Oak Island in 1961, and he arrived with a different set of tools than almost everyone before him. He was a land surveyor by trade, not a promoter, not an investor chasing a story. A man whose profession was the precise recording of where things sit in relation to each other. That distinction runs through everything he did on the island, and it is the reason the concrete floor matters. Working alongside landowner M.R. Chappell and treasure hunter Robert Restall, Nolan surveyed virtually every inch of the 140-acre island, not the promising parts, all of it. Every rise, every depression, every stone that seemed out of place. He cut survey lines through the trees at his own expense and laid a grid across ground that no previous searcher had bothered to map with instruments. Out of that work came something no other Oak Island searcher produced. More than 100 hand-drawn maps, elevations, bearings, positions.
I think Fred Nolan is an absolute true believer. He's as obsessed as anybody else. But I think he has to fight internally in himself to release all this stuff that he kept so private for so long.
Decades of measurement recorded by hand, in a discipline where a careless number is a professional failure. In 1963, he purchased a large block of acreage near the island's north shore, and the purchase itself became the first shot in a feud that lasted the rest of his life. Nolan's lot sat inside the island the other searchers wanted to work, and the arguments over access, rights, and roads hardened into decades of hostility. He was locked out of areas. He was written off by men who considered him a nuisance rather than a researcher. He kept surveying anyway. The most famous result of that work is the arrangement now known as Nolan's Cross. Nolan identified a series of large boulders on his property that, plotted on his maps, appeared to form the shape of an enormous cross laid across the landscape, measured in hundreds of feet rather than inches. Whether the arrangement is deliberate or a trick of geology is still argued. What is not argued is how it was found. It was not found by intuition. It was found by a man plotting rocks on paper until a shape emerged from his own numbers. He was equally fixated on the swamp, an irregular patch of ground that he did not believe belonged there naturally, and he spent years working it for evidence. And he collected the hardware that turns up on Oak Island shorelines, including ring bolts driven into rock, the kind of fittings that suggest something was once moored, anchored, or hauled at a place where nothing should have needed mooring. That is the man. Not a dreamer waiting for a vision, a measurer.
He helped survey virtually every inch of the 140-acre island.
Somebody whose entire method was recording what could be verified and plotting it until the plotting said something, which is what makes the concrete so strange. A man who documented everything found something he refused to document. The things the searchers destroyed. To understand what was in that floor, it helps to look at what Oak Island has already lost. In 1921, a huge boulder covered in carved inscriptions was found on the island's northern shore. Nobody knew what the markings meant. Nobody could date them. The searchers of the day decided that a stone that unusual must be a marker, a signpost pointing at what lay beneath it. So they dynamited it and dug underneath, and found nothing at all. The clue was the object. They destroyed the object to reach the treasure. 15 years later, in 1936, treasure hunter Gilbert Hedden did the one preserving act in the whole episode. He gathered the larger fragments and saved them. Among them was a piece carrying 3 symbols, a letter, H, a cross, and a circle with a dot at its center. That fragment became known as the HO stone, and it has been discussed far more often than it has been seen. The pattern repeats. In 1897, treasure hunter Frederick Blair found a triangle laid out in round stones on the island's south shore. Each side measured 10 feet. Its apex pointed true north, directly at the money pit. It was surveying, not decoration, and it was bulldozed out of existence during Robert Dunfield's excavations in the 1960s. And the pattern runs back to the beginning. In 1804, when the money pit was first excavated to 90 feet, the diggers reported oak platforms set at 10-foot intervals. At the 9th platform, there was an embedded stone covered in carvings nobody could read. It was removed. It passed from hand to hand. And, like the boulder and the triangle, it eventually disappeared from the record entirely. 4 inscribed objects, 4 chances to read something, 4 separate losses. By the time the current search resumed, the carved stones of Oak Island had been treated for 2 centuries as obstacles rather than evidence. Who found them, when, and exactly where, is largely undocumented. What survives is rumor layered on rumor, and the H.O. stone, the one fragment that had actually been rescued, had itself gone missing. 7 feet of darkness. The turn toward the stones did not come out of nowhere. It came out of a failure underground. Rick Lagina brought back underwater visualization expert Brian Abbott, whose scanning sonar had already been used at borehole 10X to support the reading that a man-made chamber lies at its base.
Jordan Valley well drillers to come in because there is an obstruction at about 141.
This time, the target was a hole near the original money pit, where the team believed evidence remained of the wooden vault reported by Frederick Blair and William Chappell in 1897, roughly 143 feet down. An obstruction sat at about 141 feet. Jordan Rogers of Valley Well Drillers swabbed the hole clear, and a measuring cable came back at 148, leaving about 7 feet of open hole. The sonar went down 6 inches at a time and returned almost nothing. At 145, exactly where the core sample had come from, the scan read as almost completely closed. Deeper, the space widened from about 1.5 feet to 2 feet. No angles, no structure, no timber. Just an unconsolidated shaft of sediment. 44 shafts have been sunk into that ground since 1795. Everyone left voids. Everyone destabilized what surrounded it. The money pit is harder to read now than at any point in its history. Rick called it off. The hole could not answer the question, so the search moved to the one place generations of digging had not yet obliterated: the surface. The oldest witness on the island. For information about the island's stones, there was one obvious source, and he was not an academic. Dan Blankenship was 92. He had been on Oak Island since the 60s, more than 50 years of it, and the island had taken from him in every way it takes from people. He had been buried alive in it. He had never walked away. Rick asked him about a specific stone, the famous one, the H.O. stone. Dan remembered it clearly. He had seen it out in the field years earlier, back when he was doing drilling work. It was there. It was real. He had stood beside it. Then, sometime around 20 years before, it was simply not there anymore. Not moved to a museum, not sold, not recorded. A rescued fragment of one of the strangest inscriptions ever found on the island had come off the board without a line of paperwork, and the men closest to it could not say what year it happened. Rick pressed. Was Dan certain it was gone? Dan had not seen it in decades, which is not the same as knowing, but somebody had moved it, because stones that size do not walk. Dan had asked Fred Nolan directly whether he had taken it. Nolan said he had not, and then Dan added a line, half in jest, about the long feud between the two men. Just as Nolan had not taken those big rocks either. Rick stopped. What big rocks? The ones concreted into his floor. 3 of them.
Like them big rocks, huh?
Uh-huh.
What rocks are those, though?
The ones that are concreted into his floor.
The floor across the causeway. In 1969, Nolan built a small museum on the mainland, just across the causeway from Oak Island. Inside, he displayed nearly a decade of accumulation. Artifacts, photographs, newspaper articles about the search. And in the center of the building, in the floor, he set several large stones into concrete. Stones he had removed from the island himself. He closed the museum in 1990 and later sold the property. The stones stayed in the floor. The new owners, Barry and Karen Publicover, bought a building with unexplained carved rocks embedded in the middle of it, and spent years wondering what they had. What Nolan told them was brief. The stones were very valuable to the Oak Island story. He had found them on the island. He wanted them kept somewhere they would be safe forever. Forever is a surveyor's word for permanent. It is not a word about display. Setting an object in concrete does not preserve it any better than a crate does. What concrete does is prevent movement. It stops a stone from being carried off, sold, traded, or turned over. Whether the three were arranged in a specific pattern, the owners could not say. But they knew how Nolan thought. He was fixated on the way rocks pointed. Every rock on his property, in his view, was aimed in a specific direction for a specific reason. It would be consistent with everything else about him if he had set these three to preserve an alignment he had recorded on the island, which would mean the arrangement itself was part of the record. One thing required no interpretation. Nobody sinks three heavy stones into a concrete floor for objects they consider insignificant. The effort is the evidence. The concrete is the argument. Rick made a call, arranged with the owners to remove the stones and return them to the island, and went to get a jackhammer. Anyone following the stone thread should subscribe before the next section, because what came out of that floor carried letters that had been face down since 1969. Breaking it open. Rick Lagina arrived with Dave Blankenship and Jack Begley. The permission was in place. The only question was whether the stones could be freed without damaging what was carved on them. It went the way most things go on Oak Island, slowly, awkwardly, with more effort than the job appeared to require. Nothing about it was smooth. Jack took the first shift on the jackhammer. When he stepped back, Dave Blankenship stepped in, a man well past the age at which anyone volunteers for that machine, working until he was soaked through. Two older men breaking a concrete floor apart by hand, because a dead man's judgment was set into it. The concrete gave up its grip in pieces. The first stone came free. Water went onto the surface to bring the carvings out of the shadow, and the team crouched around it. The first mark was a straight vertical line, a Roman numeral 1 possibly, or simply a 1. Then the light caught the grooves and the shape resolved differently. An X, not weathering, not a fracture. The strokes crossed clean, cut by a hand and a tool. On an island where 2 centuries of searchers have chased the idea of a marked spot, a carved X came out from under a floor where a surveyor had hidden it. Nobody on the team could say why an X was there. That question stayed open. The letters underneath, they kept working and more marks appeared. 2 letters, side by side, argued over in real time. A P, possibly, or an R. Then a second letter beside it and the pairing that kept returning. R.E. Rick raised the possibility immediately. The H.O. stone had come from a shattered boulder, and shattered boulders produce fragments, and fragments scatter across a shoreline. Fred Nolan had spent decades walking every square foot of that island with a surveyor's eye and a grid in his head. If anyone was positioned to find the scattered pieces of a dynamited inscription, it was him. The stones were heavy, awkward, and not obviously related to each other. Rick's assessment was that if these were part of a bigger puzzle, the team had just added 3 new pieces. When someone asked how many pieces the puzzle contains, his answer was that you need 300 for a 300-piece puzzle. The number is not knowable in advance. The pieces are collected until the picture stops being a guess. What the team needed was someone who could tell them what they were looking at and make the carvings more visible than water and daylight could. Before the end of the day, Rick arranged it. Terry Duval is a stone structure expert and a local historian, and he met Rick at the Oak Island Visitor Center, where the recovered stones had been brought. He had never seen them. Almost nobody had. Rick asked the first question that mattered. Were the marks natural or were they made? Duval did not hedge. Definitely man-made. Then he read them. R, ans, E, 2 halves of 1 stone. Rick noticed something on the second stone, a straight line, and beside it, a semicircle. Together the 2 elements formed a shape. Duval agreed. It looked like a D. Then came the observation that changed the day. The edge of one stone appeared to follow the curvature of the edge of the other. Not roughly, closely. They moved the 2 stones together. The pieces fit. Not approximately. Not close enough to argue about. Duval's description was that they fit like a glove. These were not 3 unrelated rocks gathered as souvenirs by a stubborn old man. At least 2 of them had once been a single stone, broken apart. and Fred Nolan had found both halves and taken them off the island together. He had held both pieces. He had almost certainly matched them himself, the way anyone who plots rocks for a living would. And joined, the two surfaces carried a run of letters, R, E, D, D, E. The team reached for what might follow, another letter, possibly an N. And then somebody said the name that had been circling the story since 1936, Hedden, Gilbert Hedden, the New Jersey businessman who searched Oak Island in the 1930s, the man who saved the fragments of the dynamited boulder in the first place, and whose name is attached to the surviving H.O. stone. If the leading letter is an H, the carving may read Hedden. But to Duval and to Rick, it did not look like an H. It looked, more than anything else, like an R. Red. The two readings are not close in meaning. They are opposites. Hedden is a name. A name cut into rock is a claim of presence. It says a man was here, on this shore, in this decade, and wanted the fact recorded. It is a signature, and signatures on Oak Island have a habit of turning out to be modern. If the letter is an H, the stones are a 20th century artifact of the search itself, and 80 years of speculation collapses into a treasure hunter's initials. Rede is not a name. In Latin, it is a verb in the imperative, give back, return it. An imperative is not a label, it is an instruction, and an instruction has to be addressed to somebody. Nobody carves a command into stone for their own benefit. A command assumes a reader, arriving later, who is in a position to obey it, and the choice of verb carries more than the choice of a noun would. Return is not the same as take, or find, or keep. Return presumes prior ownership. Something cannot be given back unless it was first given away, or lost, or taken from a party who had a claim to it. A carved instruction to return implies a rightful owner, a wrongful holder, and a transfer that somebody wanted reversed. That reading remains unproven. Nobody in that room could declare it, and nobody did. What existed was a run of letters on two matched fragments, a carved X, an edge that fit an edge, and a surveyor's decision to seal all of it under a floor. But it does answer one thing about Nolan's behavior that the Hedden reading does not. A man who finds another man's name carved on a rock has no reason to hide it. A man who finds an instruction and suspects who it was written for might. The team learned a little. As usual, not enough. 9 levels down. The following day brought a visitor with a complete answer rather than a fragment of one. John O'Brien spent 35 years in the mining industry, specializing in retrieving valuable material from places that should be unreachable. And he had carried an Oak Island obsession since childhood, in nearby Halifax. Marty Lagina put the objective plainly. He wanted the cavity at 235 feet, the post, a piece of it, and the box. Nobody does this much work to hide marbles. O'Brien's account began with his father. In the early 1960s, his father and his friend Charlie were on Oak Island, and they found a rock shaped, as O'Brien described it, like an ice cream cone, flat on top, tapering downward like an arrow pointing into the ground. They dug around it, and the surface was carved, hieroglyphs cut into the rock. They used latex paint to lift impressions of the markings and mailed them to a university in the United States. O'Brien was a boy when the box came back. He was there when it was opened. Inside were the impressions and an envelope, and Charlie read the reply aloud. The hieroglyphs came from Central America. Another carved stone. Another set of markings sent away, read once, and never resolved publicly. From that, O'Brien built his theory. Before asking what is buried on Oak Island, he argued, the question is who did the work? His answer was the Aztec Empire. The Aztecs thrived from 1428 to 1521. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, was an engineered city of pyramid temples decorated with gold and served by a sophisticated water distribution system. In 1519, Hernando Cortés began the campaign that destroyed the empire, and one thing the Spanish never recovered was its stockpile of gold and jewels. It did not appear in the accounts or the holds. It vanished from the record. O'Brien's chain starts earlier, around 800 AD, with a Mayan vessel coming ashore in Nova Scotia and finding something in the sediment worth more to Mesoamericans than gold. Pelagic clay, known as blue clay, used to adorn Mayan temples and valued for medicinal properties. Large deposits are not known in Mexico, though the material appears in parts of the southeastern United States. In 2011, researcher Richard Thornton published contested findings arguing that ruins in northern Georgia are Mayan, dating back roughly 1,100 years. And weeks before O'Brien's visit, Rick, Marty, and Jack Begley dug at a location indicated by researcher Robert Marcus and brought up a large quantity of blue clay. That part is not theory, it came out of the ground. O'Brien's reconstruction runs as follows. The South Shore shaft was the first shaft sunk on the island, and it was a mine rather than a vault. The Mayans found the clay, sank a shaft roughly 8 feet across, and reached the deposit at around 50 feet. 300 feet was the limit of their ventilation, which requires a second hidden ventilation shaft somewhere on the island. When O'Brien looked for where that shaft would have to be, he arrived at the money pit itself. Centuries later, by his account, the Aztecs arrived carrying what they could save of a collapsing empire, find an abandoned mine already cut into the ground, and remodel it, not into a hiding place, into a lure built to look exactly like what a treasure seeker hopes to find, and rigged with flood tunnels. Then the detail that ties the theory back to the stones. In Aztec belief, the souls of the dead had to pass through 9 levels before reaching their ultimate reward. In 1804, the diggers in the money pit found 9 oak platforms at 10-foot intervals, and at the center of the 9th platform sat a stone covered in carvings nobody could read, which was lifted out, handed around, and lost. Whatever the truth of the Aztec theory, that is the point where it stops running parallel to the stone thread and joins it. The first searchers dug through 9 levels, reached a carved stone at the bottom of the count, took it out, and let it disappear. 2 centuries later, the team is trying to read carved stones, a surveyor cut out of concrete, because everything found earlier is gone. That may be coincidence. Oak Island has produced a great deal of coincidence, but it is the first account offered that gives a reason why 9 would matter, and why a stone would be waiting at the end of the count. What Nolan actually did. The revelation on Oak Island is not a translation. Nobody has proven what the letters spell. The revelation is a reversal of who was doing what. For 220 years, the searchers on that island have treated the carved stones as the packaging around the prize. In 1921, they dynamited an inscribed boulder to dig beneath it. In the 1960s, a triangle of round stones pointing true north at the money pit was bulldozed away during excavation. In 1804, a carved stone at the bottom of the 9th platform was pulled out and lost within a generation. 44 shafts went to the ground where the answer might have been recorded, and turned it into rubble, mud, and voids that no sonar can read. Every generation destroyed the message trying to reach the money. Fred Nolan did the opposite. He was the one man on that island whose training was measurement rather than extraction. He mapped what others bulldozed. He plotted boulders until they made a shape. And when he found carved letters on broken rock and matched 2 halves that fit like a glove, he did not dig under them, or sell them, or publish them. He removed them from an island where inscribed stones had a 200-year record of being destroyed, carried them across the causeway, and locked them into a floor where nothing could move them. He hid the message so it would outlive the diggers, and it did. The boulder is gone, the triangle is gone, the 9th platform stone is gone, the HO stone is gone. The 3 Nolan sealed in concrete are the ones still here to be read. The hidden meaning behind Oak Islands, ancient stone may not be the letters at all. It may be what a careful man concluded about them in silence and acted on for 50 years. Subscribe to follow where the carvings lead next, and leave a comment on the letter itself. An H for Hedden or an R for Retta. One reading makes the stones a footnote to the search. The other makes them an instruction.